One of the challenges of using Python, as opposed to other languages, is the multitude of approaches, none of which dominates others. This demonstration introduces Spyder. Spyder is the simplest approach to using Python and is probably the best choice if you are new to programming. To launch Spyder, select Spyder from the Start menu or your launcher. This is the Spyder window. The first thing you'll notice is there are 3 distinct panes. The most important one is on the left, and this is where you'll enter your code. By default, Spyder always opens with a temporary file, so you should be aware of this because you'll always need to save it someplace useful. We can edit code over here. There's in particular one mode that's extremely useful when you're getting started, and it's called cell mode. To enter cell mode, we need to use a special marker that starts with a hash and then is followed immediately by 2 percentage marks. As soon as I made that, you can see 2 things have happened. First, there's a horizontal line across the entire editor. Second, the cell that I'm in has actually turned yellow. If I put another marker in like this, you can see that in fact, the second cell that I've now created with this special marker is highlighted, and the first cell is white. If I turn the cursor back into the first cell, you can see that cell becomes highlighted. This is useful because the Spyder editor makes it simple to run code from individual cells. Just to get started with Spyder, let's write a few simple lines of code. We'll start with a print statement, which is just print, and then quotes. I'll type hello, and that's the end of the statement. We're also going to import a library that's going to be important for us eventually. It's called NumPy. So I'm going to type import NumPy. We'll spend more time on the import command later, but in a nutshell, this command is simply going to tell Python that I want to use functions from the module named NumPy. And then in fact, I'm going to use one of these functions. I'm just going to type NumPy dot and then the word arange. That's a function that's going to create a vector that starts at 0 and goes up to the value I give it. I'm just going to use 10 here. So now that I've written these 3 lines, what I want to do is I actually want to run the code. You can see in the bottom right, there's a pane that's labeled console or IPython console. That console is actually where the code's going to run. That's an interactive terminal. You can directly enter commands in there. For example, I could just create a variable called x equals 1, and I enter that, and now I've actually created a variable named x equals 1. The disadvantage of directly using the console is these commands are temporary and they won't be saved in my file or anywhere else. So if I want to actually save my code, it's best to enter it in the editor. I'm going to turn back to my active cell over here, and I'm going to do 2 things. I can right click and I can see there's a menu, and the first item in the menu is run cell. Importantly, the shortcut is also listed. Since I'm on Windows, the shortcut is Control and Return at the same time. So I can click that, and what you see immediately is in the console, those lines have effectively been copied and pasted into the console, and they've been executed. So 2 things you see in the output. You first see hello, which was created by the print statement. The second thing you see is this box out 2, and then it says array, and it goes from 0 to 9. That is the actual array that I created with the command arange. If I want, I can go back over to the cell, and for this time I'm going to press Control and Enter, and that just runs the cell again. If I go down to the next cell, I can simply type another simple command. I'll just type second cell. And then if I press Control and Enter in this cell, you can see that all that's going to happen is I'm going to run the code that's in that cell. So this is a really useful feature because it lets you develop your code in small pieces, run it one at a time, get each block working, and then move on to the next step of your task. There are a number of useful features of the Spyder editor. So up in the top right, you can see there's a box called Help. It actually has 3 tabs along the bottom. We'll take them in turn. So the help is very useful because it actually lets us display help for functions. So if I take a function arange Imagine I'm not familiar with it and I want to know, what does this function do? How could I actually use it? So if I highlight the function and I right click on it, I could press go to definition, but that's actually not what I want. What I want to do is I want to see the help. You can see in the help window, it says press Control+I in front of any object, and that'll show me the help for that object. So again, I've selected arange, and I'm going to press Control and I. And you can see it's changed now, and it says arange at the top. It has the definition. It says arange start, stop, step, and dtype. These brackets around the parameters mean those are actually optional parameters. That's something we'll get to in later modules. But what we can do here is we can actually see the entire help for arange. We can see what each parameter does, what each doesn't do. Depending on the quality of the help file, we can actually see things it's related to. And then finally, we of course can see some examples. So these are all useful things to have. I can do that for any function. For example, if I just type numpy.sqrt, which is the square root function, and again, press Control-I, and immediately the help browser will jump to square root. This is a really useful way to start understanding how to use various functions, what they're going to do, and see examples from them. Of course, you can get all this help online as well, but it's nice sometimes to have this integrated, especially when you're typing a command and the command maybe isn't working as you expect it to. So that's the help window, again, which is a really useful thing. Another useful feature is called Variable Explorer. So Variable Explorer will actually show me the types and the values of any variables I've actually created. So I go back into my cell that I created here, and I have this arange command. I didn't actually assign this to a variable, so there's nothing on the left-hand side of this. I didn't type x equals something or y equals something. So I'm just going to call this y equals np arange, and I'm going to delete this second command. And then I'm going to run this cell again. So I'm just going to press Control and Enter. Okay, you can see it appeared at the bottom right, but what's changed here is you can now see there's another variable in the Variable Explorer. So I now have x, which I created in the terminal, but I also have y, which I created in my piece of code. So this is, again, a really useful feature we have of Spyder, that we can see what we've actually created, we can see the values of them, we can see arrays, and so on. The final box that's worth mentioning is the File Explorer. The File Explorer just sort of shows you the current directory. The directory is actually listed here. So I'm actually going to go into my documents. And then I'm actually going to go to a folder I've already created called Python Introduction. You see there I have some files that I've also created. So of course this file is not saved. In fact, it comes with a temporary name. It's called temp.py, which isn't very useful. So I want to go ahead and click and save that. I'm going to save that as lesson 2 Spyder, which is what the assignment asked me to save it as. So I just save it as that. And now, I think I saved it in the wrong place. So I need to make sure I'm in the right place. Yes, it saved me in the default place, which isn't very useful. So I want to go back, save that one more time, save that in my documents, go into Python Introduction, and then save it as lesson 2 Spyder. And now you can see the file is actually over here. We can right click on the file. One thing I can do as well is I can actually just run this file. When I click on run the file though, it will actually run it in a new console. So this console here has in fact run every command that was in my file. And in fact, there's a Variable Explorer associated with it. You can see here though, there's only y. In console 1, which was the interactive console associated with this, there's actually x and y. That's because x was defined manually in the console. Y was actually defined through the program. And so when I run the program or the script by itself, all you see is y. And again, another sort of useful feature is able to run this code directly. Another useful thing of running code directly is you can see the console is still there. So I wanted to, I can define other variables here. And in fact, afterwards, I can see the other variables. What's also useful in the console in particular, though, is to be able to just inspect variables. So I see y, I can see its values, I could change values in y, I could do things, and of course I could copy and paste the code back to my program, and then later I could run it again. So this has been a really brief introduction to Spyder. this is going to be, for most of you, I think this will be the preferred way to actually develop code in the course. Spyder is a good development environment for getting started in Python programming. This concludes this brief introduction to Spyder.